Good evening. It's Tuesday, January 9th, 2018, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Rhinebeck Central School District Board of Education. I'm calling this meeting to order. May I have a motion for approval of the minutes of our last meeting, December 12th?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, corrections, amendments? All those in favor? Okay, that is 6 in favor. One of our members is not present. We have time for public comment. Anyone wishes to make public comment? Okay. Moving along, on to reports and discussions. We are very fortunate to greet Emily Davison this evening, who will be giving us her annual special education report. Thank you, Emily.
So anybody who wants to move their seat can, or not?
Slides.
Will we be able to see here? Probably.
I think so.
Yeah, I think it'd be okay there, yeah.
I know, it's so cool.
Good evening. Thank you all so much for inviting me here today. This is my second time having the opportunity to present the state of special education in the Rhinebeck Central School District, and I feel very fortunate to be here yet again. So I want to thank you, Board of Education, and staff for this opportunity. In preparation for tonight's conversation, you received 3 things. You received one, the PowerPoint that is in front of us. That will be used for talking points. And it's a visual tool. I will not be speaking directly to that, and I will be tying that into the conversation into also the data tables, which is the second document that you received, that set of data tables. So we'll be flipping back and forth a little bit between the PowerPoint and the more detailed data tables. And then third, the special education district plan. Many of the components of the plan that you received, the identification of students, the evaluation process, eligibility, format of the IEP, and the components therein are all part of the New York State Commissioner's Regulations, Part 200, that governs special education in New York State, which is New York State's response to federal regulations and mandates. What is specific to Rhinebeck therein are those nuanced programs that I'll speak to in the presentation. The special class programs, the ratios, the consultant teacher services, and some of those more specific pieces are unique to the Rhinebeck Central School District. But by and large, a lot of the content that's within the plan is taken from the Commissioner's Regulations. So tonight, we will be continuing having the conversation about the needs of our special education population, the delivery of services here in the Rhinebeck Central School District. We'll examine the trends of the student population, and then and the trends of the service delivery, and then we'll also talk about the enhancements to the program and to the initiatives that we have here in the district for this year. And this is a dialogue, and I appreciate some of the responses and questions to the documentation that I provided to the board prior to the meeting. But this is a dialogue, so please ask, because I want to hear the questions. It helps me to shape my presentation for next year and my thoughts and my communication to the Board of Education in the future. Okay. So, current special education enrollment. Currently, we have 124 identified students in grades kindergarten through age 21, and I say age 21 because students can receive special education services beyond the typical 4-year high school plan, so beyond grade 12. That is the same number as the students of classified students as last year. 124 were identified last year at this time. The classification rate has changed slightly. Last year was 11.8, this year is 11.9. Why is the classification rate slightly higher when our current special education population number remains constant? Well, it has to do with the fewer general education population overall. And so when you look at that, we have 1,040 as compared to 1,048 when we took this data last year. So that's where you see that slight rise in the classification rate. That being said, the classification rate is lower than state averages and lower than our local commensurate school districts, neighboring school districts. So looking at school districts of similar size, we see classification rates of 13% all the way up to 17 and close to 18%. So we, yes.
Into that question, can we drill into some of the detail though for across school districts? Like, are our numbers for autism higher or lower? Like, what's the breakdown relative to the total number?
That is a good question. That is not a drill down that I have done yet. In Dutchess County, we as a group of PPS directors and directors of special education are starting to do a lot of this comparison of programmatic offerings, of how we supervise special education programming across districts, of how we provide administrative support to programming and to programs. And I think that's the next step too, is drilling down into, all right, we have a general idea of where we fall in terms of our neighbors, but what do we see in terms of neighboring trends? What I can tell you anecdotally is that conversation at local Dutchess County level and even Columbia County level is the concern about meeting the needs of our students in the area of mental health, and that being a rise in general across districts. That is a part of special education. It's not the whole thing, but we certainly are seeing an increased demand to meet the rising needs of our students in the area of mental health. And that, I think, speaks to the increase of the students we have identified in our district who are identified as having emotional disturbance. Last year we had 4, this year we have 7. So that speaks to that. That number also reflects, as students are reevaluated every 3 years, their classifications may change. So a student who might have been otherwise classified as other health impairment may have a change in disability classification, because what is manifesting as being most adverse to their access of the curriculum and the instruction is not maybe the ADHD piece, but more so the emotional response or the anxiety piece.
I think you may have just answered that, but for someone that is listed as emotionally disturbed, would anxiety fall under that?
It can also fall under other health impairment. It depends on how it manifests, quite honestly. And I'm speaking to the current state of special education in the Rhinebeck School District. What is not represented here, and it might be something that you'd like to see me include for next year and subsequent conversations this year, is the rise of our students identified as needing a 504 plan for situations such as anxiety. Now, a student receiving a 504 plan doesn't require special education services, but certainly is afforded accommodations by all their teachers, and may receive services such as counseling or academic intervention or speech and language services, but they don't require the special education instruction. The other piece that I wanted to point out regarding this, there was a slight decrease in other health impairment, which tends to be an umbrella classification to support the students who have a medical diagnosis or a perceived medical need that limits their access to the instruction, so that limits their vitality and their ability to gain to independently function within the classroom environment. So those are our students with ADHD, those can be our students with anxiety. That number has decreased by just slightly, just by 3. And I think that has something to do with really being careful and being clear about what their impairment is, and if it is more appropriately classified under one of the other 13 classifications, then we do so. Because you can find overlap between OHI, other health impairment, and autism, and emotional disturbance. It can be hard to tease out. Any other questions about this? Great, it's a little back. Total students served by district programs. And so we're looking at the majority of our students being serviced are at CLS, which makes sense because that has the largest student population, and then BMSB 31, and then RHSB 41. At the time we collected the data, we had 2 students receiving homebound instruction. One was pending a placement, and the other one is there is situations that prevent the student from attending the program at this time. And then we have students who are parentally placed. Now, students who are in, and this is a new situation to our school district. We welcome the Primrose Hill school, private school in our district. When students attend school there, if there is a concern about a student having a disability, the parent of that student may certainly refer that child to the school district of location. And so while the parent might be a resident of, say, Red Hook or Poughkeepsie or Hyde Park, we as the school district of location, we're responsible for the child find, identification of, and the delivery of services. And so in this situation for this year, we are starting to see that need and provide services for students, for each student who attends there. And then we also provide services for students who are homeschooled by parent choice in their home. They are, per their IEP, they would come into the building to receive special services as determined by the committee. Yes.
So has it always been by location, not by residence?
Well, the district of residence will eventually encumber those expenses, but the district of location is the one who is identifying and providing those services. There was some conversation about there being a partnership, and then there was a few years ago, but that has recently been more cleanly identified as the responsibility being the school district of location. And so if we have a student, as we do, who attends Primrose, who is not a Rhinebeck resident, we have very little communication in terms of the identification of and the delivery of service of the services for that student with the student's resident district. But we communicate when we get to the point where services need to be paid for.
So we get reimbursed.
You get reimbursed.
We get reimbursed. And likewise, we receive those similar expenses from students who attend private schools outside of our district. And so we ensure that the student is a resident of our school district. We work with the business office to do that. And those funds get Yes.
So in both these cases, whether they're homebound instruction or at, say, Primrose, if they require services, what is the district's obligation as far as, like, do we have to transport them here? Like, how?
Good. So the district makes a determination as to where the services will be delivered. And so in the case, so in some cases, if we're making the recommendation that the services will be delivered at a school building, a Rhinebeck school building at CLS, then we are responsible for transporting them. If we make the recommendation that the services are delivered at the school, then we don't provide that transportation for those services. And that those decisions are made as we look at staffing and resource allocation and what makes the most sense for that for the service delivery. And so that's done towards the spring. Currently, we have a student who both receives services at Primrose, but also does come to CLS for another service. And so there's a little bit of both. And it's been working out very well. It's our first year partnering with Primrose. They've been open. So one of the questions that came up prior to this meeting was the idea of trends in the cohort. So I'd like us for a moment to turn to page 2, or sorry, not page 2, to table 4, where it talks about the district special education. And I want to point out a couple of different things when we look at student numbers across the grades. And we see in general that students across kindergarten and first grade and second grade, the numbers of identified students is low. And it's lower because, one, we have the responsibility to provide the special general education instruction before we identify it as required special education services. With the exception, of course, of kindergarten of this current year, and I'll explain that when we talk about CPSC. And then, as you see, the numbers do increase in each cohort across the board, across the years. There was a question about the number of students in 12th grade, for example, in 07-08, compared to the number of 12th graders in 17-18. And what is why do we see that kind of disparity in that 12th grade graduating class after they've received 13 years of 12 to 13 years of instruction in the district. And our numbers, there are a couple of different reasons for this, but I think overall it's hard to identify trends when we're talking about such low numbers, because we're talking about, we're looking at really individuals at that point. I think a more interesting perspective is to look diagonally. So if you're looking at the 07-08 kindergarten class, and you see that in 08-09 they're in first grade, so there's 3 to that cohort, and then you move diagonally down to 6. What I would want to see as the director of special services is that I would expect to see few students identified in K and 1. I would expect to see that balloon and increase as we get to 3, 4, and 5 after they've received academic intervention services in response to intervention, that they're not meeting the benchmarks. They're being identified, and then through that special education services, the services, their needs are being met, there's remediation taking place, and of course not all, but some are developing those skills to become independent, and we decrease services to the point of declassification. That is not always the case, given the various natures of disabilities and the individuals involved. And I think overall, when we look at the state of education from 07-08 to 17-18, I also think about what has changed in education. And one huge piece is the introduction of the Common Core in New York State and across the country. And with that, the increase of rigor in state and assessments, including the ELA and math assessment and the regions. And when you have an increase of standards and expectation, you have an increase of rigor in the assessments, standardized assessments, what you see is a widening gap. And so you do see an increase of referrals for those reasons. And so that's something to be mindful of. But I think an interesting way to look at this table is diagonally, because then you're looking at the actual cohort. And like I said, we'd like to see it be a little bit more of a bell curve.
So that's a really interesting thought, and it's quite obvious now that you stated that Common Core really changed the way we think about and classify children, you know, in terms of their ability to meet certain kinds of standardized assessments. Is there any sense amongst your professional peers and yourself of how the shifts in the ways in which New York State is planning on assessing student learning moving forward might impact some of these numbers?
You know, I think that there are so many moving targets. I think that it's hard to say.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, the conversation about the rise of mental health needs has in some ways, overshadowed some of those conversations of identified learning disabilities and students' interaction with the academic environment.
But in terms of the standards and the higher identification numbers, this chart only includes special education, not 504s.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I work in partnership with our 504 compliance officers at the elementary school. It's both assistant principals. It's Fern Locks, and at the middle school, high school, it's Mark Burke. And so we work very, very closely when there are questions about students' needs being best serviced in which of the two committees. But I don't directly oversee those plans. So this is outlined, when moving to the programs that we offer in our district, this is outlined more in the special education plan. But I will touch on each here and now. And feel free to ask questions as you need. So the Rhinebeck Central School District is required to provide special education support and instruction in the least restrictive environment. And I know that I've said this at our previous meeting, and the least restrictive environment is different for everyone. So for a student who is academically achieving and does not present any handicapping condition, then it is general education without services. For a student for some students, it requires more intensive pull-out services that are related services that takes them from their class for a period of the day, but for the majority of the day they're in their general education class. And for other students, it requires support within that general education class. And so when we're looking at the continuum of support, we're looking at least restrictive to most restrictive. So some of the least restrictive environment support we have in our school district are in the area of related services. And so there's our speech and language therapy, occupational therapy, and physical therapy, as well as counseling, hearing services, and vision therapy services. We also provide parent training and counseling to those students whose behaviors at home are impeding their learning here at school. And so those that often students who have autism often require that type of support. Then we have consultant teacher services, and so these services provide the opportunity for students to stay in their classroom but receive that push and support. And that special education teacher works with those students within the classroom for a period of the day, as determined by their IEP. That's direct. The indirect component to that is the teachers working and collaborating together to modify, to accommodate without that direct one-on-one interaction in the classroom. And so it can be both, a combination of the two, or it can be one or the other. Resource room is a period of the day where the student is pulled out in a group of identified special education students, a group no more than 5, with working with a special education teacher, and that is to remediate and to work on skills to help them access their general education curriculum. So that's looking at skills identified, needs identified in the IEP where there are goals established, that the teacher is working towards. So that would be in the area of their disability, reading, writing, and math. Then we have, within the classroom, again, we have integrated co-teaching, and that is when two teachers work in partnership to instruct the entire class. And so it differs from the consultant teacher in that the consultant teacher model is the special education teacher is responsible for a handful of children in that general education class, and they make the accommodations and the modifications individual to that student. What happens in the integrated co-teaching model is that the special education teacher, aware of all those individual needs and those accommodations, then says to the general education teacher, as we plan to develop this lesson, we need to incorporate this, that, and the other. And so there is that opportunity for planning and discourse, and to impact and shape the learning environment for the entire class and not just those students identified. And then we have special class programming. And so we have special class programming. Prior to this year, we've had it in various pockets as needed across 3 buildings, specific to subjects. With the board's support this year, we welcomed students into the district at CLS into a full-day special class program. That's an 811 program servicing mainly servicing 3rd graders. We can grow it out at either end, but servicing 3rd graders, and they're in that class for the majority of the day. They integrate for specials and lunch and recess, and for some structured time in a general education class for morning meeting, but by and large, all of their content, social and academic, is in that special class. And so we have variations of special class across the district. What is a blessing and can be a challenge in Rhinebeck is that we're small. And so 1 or 2 students can shift how we support a small group of students, and that was what was presented this year. And I think that as you were able to see in the table 1, when it identified the number of students who receive special ed services who've come into district over the course of this year, we've received more than we let go of and say goodbye to across the board, year in and year out, with the exception of 3 years since 2000. So being flexible like that is something that we're able to do with your support. So it's been exciting to have that 811 class and to watch it grow and to watch the students be reunited with some peers and family, siblings in the building, and have greater opportunity for integration. Any questions about those programmings? The least restrictive environment is always within the school district and the programming we can offer within our school district. The next step would be to identify other programs that are offered by neighboring public school districts that could meet a student's needs. And certainly we as a CSC do explore those options when we're thinking of extending, looking out beyond our district. We have not placed a student in the 2 years that I've been here in a neighboring district like that, but those are conversations that I'm having with my colleagues across district lines and consistently at CSC meetings. We do have students who are placed at BOCES, and this year we have 3 students who are placed in special education programs. We do have students who are identified students who receive a variety of BOCES supports and programming, including CTI. We have a number of our 11th and 12th grade students attending and benefiting from our partnership with CTI, and we have a partnership with P-Tech, where we have students who attend there as well. But for the purpose of special education placement, we have 3 students at BOCES. We have 6 students who are placed in private day placements. We have 3 at the the Center for Spectrum Services, which meets our students with with autism, the needs of our students, some of our students with autism. We have partnership with Abilities First, as well as Cardinal Hayes, and the last one, I apologize. Cardinal Hayes. Oh, and the Center for Discovery, I apologize. I forget, it's not geographically in Dutchess, so I have a hard time remembering it on my visual map. And then we have students placed in residential programs. And we partner with local agencies to support students as much as possible within their home environment. It is part of the regulation to partner with those public agencies to meet the students' needs, whether it's through the OPWDD, the Office of Persons with Developmental Disabilities, or OMH, the Office of Mental Health, to support the family and support the student within the community and within the home. But we do have 3 students who attend residential placements. And those, one is in Massachusetts, one is, so that's Hillcrest, but we have one, we have a partnership with Devereaux, and we have a partnership with the Anderson Center. And we partner with other local agencies. We offer school work programming as needed, although we have no one this year and no one expected to be participating next year. But we have historically partnered with agencies for school to work programming. Those are job exposure opportunities within the community. We have a partnership for contract for occupational therapy as well as physical therapy. And we partner with the Anderson Center for Autism to support some of our parent training and counseling needs. Before I go on, in terms of the out-of-district placements, the numbers on those really do fluctuate. You'll see a decrease from last year to this year because of the creation of the 811 program that we have at CLS. But across the board, they do fluctuate. At one point in 2009-10, we had as many as 21 students. The current number of 12 students out of district is commensurate with our neighboring community, neighboring school districts who have similar numbers placed out ranging from 9 to 19. So it's not it's a reasonable number. Of course, we're always looking to support more students within our district.
So yeah, in table 1, I think that was one of the questions I sent earlier in the day. It's just a function of the way the data is being reported here, that it looks like the out-of-district placements begin in 2014,
Right.
15. We had out-of-district placements previously.
And the table 5A and 5B speak to that history.
Okay.
And what I am fortunate enough to build on the work of my predecessors. Those numbers, the numbers that I have for on the table 1 from 14-15 to 17-18 were verified through our data management system of IAP Direct.
Okay.
I didn't verify the previous numbers.
Okay.
But that's something I can certainly do. But when you look at tables 5A and 5B, you'll see a fluctuation from anywhere from 9 students in 13-14 to 21 and 9-10. 10 and 6, 7. So there is that fluctuation.
And this captures it, so there's no need to do it manually.
Graduating in June, we had 12 students. 8 of the students received diplomas, 4 received Regents diploma, and 4 received local diplomas. We had a student receive a CDOS, which is the Career Development Occupational Study credential. A student received a Skills and Achievement credential. As a student received a GED, which is now called a high school equivalency exam. And we had one student who was unfortunately unable to reach the one of those graduation requirements, one of those milestones. How does that compare with our state? And Our New York State numbers for graduation rates for students with disabilities in 2016 was 53%. And so we had a graduation rate of 91.6%. If you look at that cohort of 12, and 66% of our students graduated with a diploma, which is higher than the 51% of students graduating with disabilities with a diploma, as identified by those New York State numbers. So 66% compared to the 51. And to speak to some of the supports we provide, I work closely with our primary providers in high school as well as our guidance counselors to, starting in 10th grade, look at students' graduation trajectory and what needs they have, and so that we can really start planning out and considering in more detail and more depth what supports they need and how to help them reach the goal of graduating with a diploma. And then 4 years, and if they need longer to then be forward planning with that, with the adding an additional year if needed. Last year we had a number of students aging into our kindergarten class, and this year we have 5 CPSE students that will be aging into our 18-19 class. Not all of them will be identified as special education students when they age in, but they're identified now as receiving and needing special education preschool services. Different criteria when you age into school age. On average, we have about 15 students at any given time who receive preschool services. And that really is the function of parents coming to the district and asking for those evaluations. The local preschools urging parents to do so. It's a parent it's the parent's choice whether they want to proceed with those evaluations. I'm also supporting our English language learners and the 2 providers that we have, and you'll see that we have a nice jump there from 16 last year to 27. I did include this year students who are also identified as being students who are former Ls, and so those are students who are tested as not and determined as not needing or not being identified as L students anymore, but they're still eligible and still required to receive services and supports 2 years after exiting from L programming. And so I think it's important to capture those students because those students are on the caseload and require the support of our 2 ESL teachers. We have 1 teacher at the elementary school, 1 teacher at the middle school and high school. This year we have 4 students requiring ESL support and instruction coming into our kindergarten cohort class. And then we had 5 students transferring, requiring that support. So again, the nature of being a smaller district, you see those needs kind of grow exponentially when you just have a handful of students, in this case 5 students to the district. Yes.
What's the capacity for each one of those teachers? How many kids could they handle? If these numbers keep going up like this, is there a constraint there?
So it's not about the number of students at this point, it's about the breakdown across the grades. And so in our elementary school, we have a student, at least 1 student in each grade. And so we have our teacher providing support from kindergarten through 5th grade. And the requirement, the CR 154 requirements are very specific. It's not like the Committee on Special Ed where we look at the individual needs of the student and make a recommendation, and that can vary from student, obviously from student to student as well as should. What happens with ESL students is that they're tested as they come into the school district, and they are determined to be a certain proficiency level, and then we have 4 or 5 proficiency bands, and based on where they fall, they are required to receive a certain number of minutes a week of integrated support and a certain number of standalone support or pull-out support, and then there's a flexible support that they can receive. But by and large, our students require, and the service delivery model is integrated for our students, and so that does not allow us to pull students out. We can't pull our kindergartners with our first graders to make a nice little small group like we were able to do in the past. But now we have to, we push it. And that's to the benefit of the students and the teachers. It allows for the general education teacher to learn from the ESL teacher and for that collaboration to take place. But if you can imagine across 6th grade levels, it can become challenging. And so I've worked with Ms. Berger at the elementary school level to have a rotating planning period where she can have times each week to meet with each grade level. So it moves throughout the week, and it has worked, but it becomes difficult when it spreads so thin. In the middle school, high school, it's a similar situation. If you have one student in the 7th grade who requires ESL services, it doesn't matter if it's 1 or 5, it's still a 41-minute period a day, probably. And that's usually what it is. It's technically it's 36 minutes over the course of 5 days for most of our students, but some of our students with higher language needs require 2 periods, 36-minute periods a day. And then that 36 minutes a day doesn't match our middle school, high school schedule, so then we build it for the period. So those are challenges. We work closely together to problem solve and develop the student schedules so that they can receive the services.
So I just wanted to be sure I understood about this number, the 27. That reflects the former English language learners.
Which we have 2 of.
Okay. Oh, so it's not like a massive number of people who are in that category.
No,
Okay.
no.
Good to know.
And McKinney Mental students. So students who are in some temporary housing, whose housing is not permanent, fixed, or adequate, are eligible for services and supports. Primarily, this is we see this as in the area of transportation needs. If they are residing out of district, that does become a responsibility of the district. That being said, the majority of our students who are McKinney-Vento eligible are students who are identified as such, but are actually are residing within the school district. So it's they fold into our current transportation routes for the majority, for the most part. And the way that determination takes place is when a student registers. If there's a suspicion that the housing is not adequate, or there is a report that there's a doubling up situation where a family is living with another family, those are situations that would then be investigated by me. And then for our students who are current students, we have conversations with the faculty to ensure that they know who our McKinney-Vento liaisons are in the district, who our school building liaisons, Morgan Labruto and Megan Rodier, and then they investigate further, and then I make the final determination.
I'm going to keep asking
No,
more questions,
please
but
ask questions.
in the last 10 years, we moved from like 110 to 9 students. Can you fill in a little bit of what the picture is?
I don't have the history with the Rhinebeck School District to
Okay.
determine that. What I can say, what I hear from families who are in these situations, is that they find themselves struggling to find housing, and then find themselves reaching out to friends for that support. So they're receiving the doubling up piece, or find temporary housing because permanent housing. The cost of permanent housing in the area, not just in the Rhinebeck School District, but in the area, is high and beyond some of our families' means. So they find alternate ways to make a residence. Yes.
How could a student be out of our transportation area and still fall into this category? Just putting it together.
So a student who is a Rhinebeck Central School District student, say they have their family lives in the district, they have a lease, suddenly they become homeless. It could be a fire, it could be a failure to pay rent and they are asked to leave and to be evicted. Or it could be the loss of an income, an illness or a death in the family. Those students have the right to receive the consistency of an education in their school district while their family is securing housing. And so it's our responsibility to identify those students and provide supports. So what the assessment that I need to do is to determine if their new living situation is permanent. Do they have a lease? Can they be evicted? Can they be asked to leave at any time? If it's adequate, do they have a place to sleep? Are they sleeping in the living room? Are they sharing a bed with two siblings? Is it fixed? Is it a car? Is it a tent? Is it a mobile home? And so, if there's a question that any kind of possibility that it's one of those three things, then we have to err on the side of caution that the student is identified. So up to 50 miles we have to provide transportation. Likewise, if a student who is living in the Rhinebeck School District is identified, they have the opportunity, by the Rhinebeck School District, they have the opportunity to continue to attend Rhinebeck, even if they live or currently reside in our school district. Yes?
Across this chart and the prior one, where there's been an increase, have those newer numbers, has the increase been spread across all grades, or do you see any trends in
Well,
the additional numbers?
our English language learner chart is across the grades. While we do have a little pocket of kindergartners this year, by and large, it's across the grades. And then in terms of our McKinney-Vento students, it's, again, I would say it is across the grade. We have a few in each school. And it's a conversation that I'm often having with Mr. Burnell and families, and trying to kind of tease apart these often complex and very sensitive issues, and consult very closely with New York, the support network that provides advisement and consult for these hard, difficult to determine cases at times. I think there are situations in which a student is living in an environment that it becomes permanent if they're living there a multiple number of years, and so those are conversations that are had. Okay, so then our current initiatives in special education in our school district. So supporting and developing district programs. One of those pieces is the establishment of a special education district plan, and to follow suit with that would be my next step there is to continue to articulate the procedures to support staff and faculty. Last year I developed our annual review procedures, and I refined that, and this year I've looked at also Medicaid documentation and procedures surrounding our Medicaid billable services. And so continuing to develop those procedures so that we have transparent and systematic ways to move through processes in the district, in the Rhinebeck School District. I continue to ensure that IEPs and classroom practices are meeting the needs of students with special needs, and so I consult with teachers, I meet with teaching teams, I provide avenues of professional development for teachers as needed, and meet with families. I offer opportunities for professional development, so at CLS we work with the Anderson Center on classroom management and behavioral support, and it's a focus this year. It's a focus cohort of teachers who meet every other month with a trainer from Anderson who provides professional development. They then have the opportunity to implement those practices, and then they get feedback from the consultant who comes in and visits their classroom and observes and provides that sort of feedback. That's going very well. Likewise, we had the opportunity to welcome in a few different presenters on October 27th, and to support our students across the districts And selfishly, we also had an opportunity to dive into the area of students with special needs and offer opportunities for professional development in areas of autism and executive functioning, as well as social emotional issues and management needs. And so that's been ongoing. And then to continue to grow the 811 program, which is currently primarily a grade 3 program, we have an opportunity to look at expanding that self-contained program to support students across a 36-month age span. So it can be a multi-grade program, and we have situations in which we might be able to meet the needs of our current and district students who might in a grade that might otherwise have historically had to be placed outside of the district, and also the opportunity to explore bringing other students back into the district who are currently placed outside. So that continues to be a wonderful addition to our school community. And then really working with parents, and that's something that is ongoing. A lot of my work with parents is one-on-one in conversations, and I really want to try to find a way to bring information to families, to bring families into communication, into a effective back and forth dialogue as a group rather than one-on-one, because I think that families would have the opportunity to recognize faces and find support amongst each other in a way that they may not necessarily have now. So last year and then this year I've had the opportunity to bring in families for workshops in the area of this fall, graduation options, later this month, talking about effective communication strategies at CSE meetings, and really work with them to, as a community, to think of ways to support them and their students, and to hear what their thoughts and feedback are outside of the one-on-one CSE process or the individual formal family meetings. And then also linking families to resources in our community. We're very fortunate to have a number of wonderful resources that I feel like they continue to grow and pop up here and there. And sometimes it can be actually overwhelming, all of the different options and opportunities for families. So continuing to provide that information to families and finding effective means of communication. Questions? Thoughts? Anything you'd like more information on?
I had just a couple of questions about the plan, which is great, and I appreciate you putting this together. On page 13, school-age students with a disability, there's this line here that says, such term does not include a student whose educational needs are due primarily to unfamiliarity with the English language. So, does this refer to language learners who don't have special needs, or are they sort of a specialized category?
So we cannot identify a student needing special education support if their barrier to the instruction is their language, is their primary language. Likewise, we cannot identify a student as needing special education support as a student with a learning disability. I should preface that with a learning disability, who also has economic barriers, who has physical impairments, a lack of instruction. We have students who come into our district who have been in a number of different districts, and they might have not received systematic continuity of instruction. Then it would require the CSE to consider that and to determine if that is a contributing factor. And if it is, then the recommendation would be for the school to provide additional academic intervention support and pre-referral intervention. Likewise, with our students who are of diverse language backgrounds, if their language is impeding their understanding of the content, then what can we do to enhance their English language learner services and other academic services before we identify them as having a disability? We haven't given them the opportunity, the exposure. It's what it's trying to protect.
Gotcha.
And the pediatrician is a little different. There is a revised copy. I apologize for that. It's probably traveling between sites and progress. Any other questions about that?
When we were at NISBA, I went to a really excellent presentation about immigrant children we're getting increasing numbers of immigrant children all over the world coming to New York State. And one of the points that the researcher, he was a sociologist, was making is that we tend to think about the needs, right? The needs of people learning English, but also how important it is for school organizations to realize the tremendous richness and the contributions immigrant children can make to our communities and to our classrooms. And he talked about some of the challenges of working with colleagues and teachers and, really trying to reframe some of the ways that we work with students with different abilities. And I'm sure that applies across the board for students in special education context too.
Absolutely. And in fact, I am working with a number of teachers and teaching assistants at the elementary school. We have this informal book group, and we're exploring that exact topic. We're looking at Neurodiversity by Thomas Armstrong, and it really talks about that every child it has a unique set of gifts, and with that student who has autism comes gifts, and we need to identify those, and we need to build on those, and even in part of some of my CSE meetings, I've kind of reframed how I've approached the CSE meeting itself. And for example, in one meeting protocol I have, which I sometimes use, is before I ask the generic, how do you feel like your child is doing, which I typically ask the family, I say, everyone give me one positive, one area of growth, one success. And even there, I'll hear, but. No, there's no but. Just leave it there. Yeah. And I think it's so important because it's not just about saying, oh, yes, they're good at singing, but they also there's no but, because you negate the singing. And so planning with their strengths in mind. Yeah. If we have a student who's in the middle school who is receiving so much academic support through AS and special education that the student doesn't have the opportunity to attend course, but they had opportunities in the past and excelled in the past, how dare we as a district? And so it's those conversations and the recognition of strength and looking at the classroom as a continuum of diverse strengths and needs. And it's a really interesting exploration in a way to look at students with needs and abilities, different abilities, diverse abilities. I encourage you all to read the book.
Yeah,
it's a quick
thank you.
page turner. And it also speaks to values.
Yeah.
We in the United States, we value reading, right? In other countries, that's not a value. And so we identify disability based on a societal, cultural context.
Right.
And you have to step back and recognize that as you're making those recommendations. It's not to say that, of course, you don't provide the support and you don't identify, but let's recognize the greater context. If that child was somewhere else or at a different time frame, would we be making that same determination?
Thank you.
Those are interesting conversations. Any other questions or thoughts? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, yes, Joe.
I'd like to let Emily go, because she's got a young one at home.
Yes.
However, we do have a little later on our agenda 6.3 to approve the special education plan. So unless you'd like me to, I wasn't going to have her hang around until we get there. But if you have any questions about that, I know Laura already asked. If there are other questions, please ask while Emily is still here, if you're able to. Otherwise, I expect that when we get to 6.3, we'll vote it up or down, or we won't have the benefit of being here. Again, unless you want her to hang around. So that's really up to you.
I don't think that would be.
I just want to make sure everybody gets questions asked,
Yeah.
answered that different.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. cold
You
in
chilly
here.
over there?
It's a little cold.
We're not done yet.
More layers. It's a little cold over there.
Welcome to your first marathon meeting.
All right, well, shall we move along in the agenda to our mid-year review of 2017-18 board goals? The floor is open for reflection.
I'd actually like to ask you, Joe, how you feel we're doing toward progress for these goals. What you are concerned about, what you think we've far exceeded, where we're going to go from here.
Yeah, well, I mean, as is not unusual, I think in terms of those 3 district goals, we're various places. But again, we're not even halfway through the year yet, so we, for example, I think we've done an awful lot in terms of long-range planning, if only in terms of frequency of meetings. And I don't say that to be a wise guy. I mean, we're meeting every 2 weeks, pretty consistently. So that's twice as much as any other board committee is meeting. We've done surveying. We've brought a lot of guests in to talk to us. I mean, we're giving you minutes pretty much every board meeting to keep you up to speed. So I think at least working towards putting together a long-range plan, which I think we said right up front, that's not going to happen in this school year. You know, we're not going to have that plan done by the end of this year. This is something that's going to take a while to put together. But in terms of, I think, making some very positive steps towards that first year of a multi-year goal, I think we've done quite a lot. Again, we're not finished, but given the amount of time in the school year since we established those goals, I think we've made, my personal opinion, probably the most progress in that particular goal. I think in terms of technology integration, we've made some, but we're pretty much scratching the surface there. So we have a ways to go on that second goal. That's manifest probably as much through some of our board committee work as it is through anything else. The third goal, I think more of that is happening.
The echoing is.
I can stand on my head and spit wood nipples too. Okay, thank you.
We're in Valhalla.
I think a lot of the social and emotional wellness work is being done in a context that you're not seeing it. Okay, I mean that there isn't a board committee that's working on social and emotional wellness, and I'm not sure exactly which board committee that might hook onto if we were to go that way. But there is a lot going on, both through the Health and Wellness Committee, as well as through Emily's work with our, not only with special education, because she touched on that, but also she's been meeting on a regular basis with our pupil personnel services staff, our social workers, our guidance counselors, our school psychologists. I've met with them a couple of times. She meets with them on a regular basis. I have gone to them and shared with them what the board's goal is in terms of social and emotional wellness, as well as my goal. It's related to the board's goal. So they know that it's a priority for me and for you, and they're very eager to get their hands on the school climate surveying that we did a little earlier in the year, and just the fact that we surveyed the entire school population is a pretty significant step towards that goal. Marvin is in the process of making arrangements for the people who put together the survey and have analyzed the data to do presentations to faculty groups. So we're taking that very seriously. It's just, you don't see that because it's not a board committee task, but a lot is happening there. I mentioned to you a couple of weeks ago that Emily and several members of the PPS staff are going to view a screening of the movie Angst, and then they were all over that before anybody else brought it to my attention. So they're looking to try to put together some kind of screening of that for the school community. I know the Health and Wellness Committee has been working on putting together their Parent Academy, is that what we call it, and the focus of that is going to be student social emotional wellness. So I think we got that clear in our sights, and I appreciate the opportunity today to kind of let you know the stuff that's happening there. So you'll be hearing more about that as a number of these initiatives get rolled out. So I think we're moving along. But I think in terms of visibility and the amount that we've been doing, that's kind of how I'd parse out those three goals. If that answers your question.
It does. Do you have an expectation for, other than you updating us at meetings, will there be a presentation to the board from, I don't know who, health and wellness, people, personnel?
Regarding that third item?
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're putting together now. And I don't know, again, if there's an interest on the part of the board to have a presentation just to the board, I'm sure we can set that up. I mean, the folks who work with that survey come up from Manhattan. They're out of Columbia University. So, it's a trip for them to get here. It's not like they're across the street. I believe that Marvin is in the process of organizing not only staff presentations, but also parent presentations. So that would certainly be open to you as parents and members of the school community. If you feel that a separate presentation is more advantageous or something you want, we can put that together. But I think we want to report out on the data to our faculty, to our parents. I've encouraged. Is that making weird noise still?
Yeah.
A little bit, not quite as bad.
Okay, I thought it was just the wind howling outside. I've been suggesting we need to do, my opinion, we need to do something to present some of that data to our students.
Yeah.
We surveyed our students.
Yeah.
Now, again, they being the folks who administered the survey, analyzed the data, and are presenting out, I'll take their recommendation as to, in terms of students, how old is developmentally appropriate to roll this stuff out. I think we surveyed like maybe grades 4 and 5. I'm not sure if we did 3, but for sure 4 and 5, right up through middle school, up through high school. So I would like to see some kind of rollout of that data to our kids, as well as to our parents and our staff members. So you'll be hearing about that stuff. And again, if anybody's feeling like, or if the recommendation from this group is that, it'd be good to do a special board presentation, then we'll set that up. If they say, well, why don't you have your board come to the community presentation, then we'll let you know when that's going to happen, and I'm glad to have you there, or both.
Do you have
Go ahead.
Do you have any idea when that? I mean, are we
Yeah.
talking
This spring.
This spring.
I mean,
Okay.
winter, spring, we're setting it up now, so
Okay.
I expect, I don't think Marvin has dates cast in stone yet, but I would imagine maybe February, March-ish, maybe a little later in the spring.
I'd be interested to hear what people think about that. It strikes me that if we attend the meetings that are designed for parents, for community, even if somebody was able to sit in on the meeting with students, if that does take place, we could learn a lot just by watching the interaction, the questions that take place, and if people felt they still needed more information, obviously we could consider whether that would be necessary to have a special board presentation. How do people feel about that? Yeah.
I think that makes sense. At first thought, I don't think we would need a special presentation to the board. I assume there's going to be a report
Yeah.
we can
Mhm.
read
We can read
or
it.
view, or Marvin can, or whoever is the appropriate liaison on our side could present it to us as well. And I don't see a need to bring on the extra expense of a separate dedicated visit.
I would also just let you know, in case you may not know, that the social and emotional wellness piece is on everybody's radar. Not only because it's manifest itself as a serious problem for schools, not just Rhinebeck, but the other interesting motivator regarding school districts to get serious about addressing social and emotional wellness of their students is that it's been, use a Marvin phrase, it's been baked into New York State's ESSA plan. And one of the indicators of, I'm not sure exactly what the right word is, so I'll tread lightly on the word, but one of the indicators of effectiveness that the federal government is going to be requiring school districts across the country to assess is social and emotional wellness. And that look that you just threw me is precisely the look that a lot of school administrators are saying, and that is, how the heck do we do that? And it's one of those things where it's baked into the plan, but I don't think anybody's given anybody a handbook as to how school districts pull it off. Certainly, by our surveying our students, parents, and staff, I think that's a good first step in terms of generating some data that we can use for planning purposes and do follow-up with. Not every school district is doing that, but I suspect once the ESSA plan actually gets approved by the federal government, there'll be a lot of scrambling as to, well, how do we do this? Because we're going to be held accountable now for providing data as to how we're doing and how we're addressing these problems. So it's going to be, it's like the next frontier beyond academics. We're not only going to be determining how many of our kids can read and write and how many of them can do math at X level, but how many of our kids are in good shape in terms of their social and emotional wellness, and how many aren't, and what school districts are doing to address that. And that kind of goes into a whole other area that is not quite as data laden as reading scores and math scores. It really goes to another place that I don't think schools have ever had to deal with. So that's out there, and I'm happy to say that we're kind of
Ahead of it.
at least slightly ahead of that curve. No one knew what the regents were going to bake into that plan, and we had this set as a goal for us because we see that as a need here. But it's apparently a need in a lot of places across the country.
Diane, you had your hand up.
I think it sounds like there'll be opportunities for us to be part of getting results from those surveys. So I wouldn't see that we need a special report from the board. I mean, I think we would need one in order to meet this goal at some point at the end of the year, whether that's just a review or report as to the findings of all the information you're doing, so that we can, satisfy that goal. Not specifically about the survey.
Yeah, I think having seen the report, it's about the size of a small telephone book. I mean, there's a lot there, and it's pretty dense, and I think it probably would be most easily digest it as a companion piece to some kind of presentation where somebody is kind of boiling it down.
Yeah.
Because if you go through this many pages, I mean, I started to do it over vacation, and my eyes were glazing over. There's just a lot there. But I think, again, as a companion piece to the presentations from the people who have done the data analysis, I think it'll make more sense to people. But I could dump that on your table next January, next meeting. But I doubt it would. I doubt it would be very, very helpful.
Jacqueline.
Could we perhaps arrange for a video recording of each of the presentations?
We'll check with them to see if they have a problem
good
with videoing, but yeah, I mean, it's not a big deal for us to do it technologically if they're okay with that, so that's a good idea. Well, we can post it to our website and blah, 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 so, good idea.
And as a follow-up, we have talked a little bit based on the coffee with the board, where lots of interesting information surfaced. Some parents talked to us about the wellness committee, asked questions about the wellness committee. And I remember after that coffee with the board, we talked a little bit here around the board table about how we can be kept abreast of what the wellness committee is doing, and whether that just comes through a report you make to us, Joe, or to some representative of that group. It would be great also to hear about their activities. Maybe, given that it's one of our goals, it would be helpful for us to know what they're doing. And it doesn't come out in the principals' reports exactly, so leave it to you to figure out where and how to convey that information to us. Okay. Anything else about the goals?
Some questions about the other goals, if we can.
Yes.
Long-range planning, given all the data collection and analysis that's been done, and that we're heading into budget season now, what contribution do you think that committee can make to respect to changes to the budget for this year's cycle, if any?
Long-range planning people, we're going to talk a little bit about that in the minutes. We, in our last meeting, just discussed we need to pivot now to digesting all that we've learned through these conversations and begin to pinpoint some areas where we think we can begin to build and consult with the whole board, but begin to build ideas about moving forward. So I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that, Laura, or...
I think that's true. We need to go into action mode as opposed to listening mode, and but I think it's not just the long-range planning committee. I think finance needs to be able to take a look at forecast 5 and see, what if we do this? How does that look going out a year, 2 years, 5 years? So there are any number of other committees that are sort of trying to throw their hat and opinions in this. So I think the financial piece is huge for the budget, and you guys dive into that much more deeply in the finance committee. So, I don't know if that means, there are more finance meetings. I have no idea.
With forecast 5.
Yeah. Or if, we talked about at one point setting up a curriculum workshop that everybody sort of seemed interested in doing, and that's sort of fallen by the wayside. Maybe it needs to be, yet another forecast 5 board workshop or something, so that we know really monetarily what we're talking about here. It's, it's all nice to hear, well, we've cut everything out of the budget, but we still have a shortfall, so we need to figure it out.
I mean, I think, like Joe said, there won't be a long-range plan done this year.
Sure.
So I think at this point, the committee, just from things that we've learned, it could be useful for the budget process, but there isn't a
Right,
plan
but
yet.
if there's a question of this or that, can the long-range plan committee strategically say this makes more sense with the direction that we think we should go?
I hope so.
Like, is that going to be something that you think?
Eventually.
Yeah, this year,
Eventually.
I don't know either. My sense is that this year, with that process starting and with a lot of the work that we've done, I think what I'm looking for is what are the opportunities to have it impact the budget discussions. There may or may not be concrete things that we can do, so I'd say that's a definite maybe, but I think as we go through this, we'll start saying, yeah, we talked to so-and-so about this, let's talk about that within the context of the budget. So it may have some spillover effect, but I don't think, unlike having a plan saying we're going to do this in year 2 and this in year 3 and this in year 4, I don't think it's going to be that cut and dry. I think we're too early in the process, but we've done a lot of stuff, and I think my sense is we're going to have some of these aha moments, like, oh yeah, yeah, we talked about that. Let's look at that in the context of this, or yeah, we looked at that in forecast 5, and when we talked to our building principals, they said this. Let's see if we can break that down. So I think it's going to be a lot of discovery during this first year before we get to a final plan in a subsequent year that will then drive the process, I think, more directly. That's kind of my guess, and it's only a guess because we're still pretty early in the process. But we put a lot of things into play in terms of data collected and data that's available. How many meetings have we had as a long-range planning committee where we're going to sit there and look at forecast 5 and like a dozen other things come up in an hour and a half? It's like, well, it's time to go. And not that we don't want to, but we'd have to like spend a whole day to do that. So it's on our agenda to get to it. And Tom, jump in if you.
Well, I think one of the big things that is a big change for the high school in that we've gone through their schedule, because that's where a lot of the flexibility is as far as the sections, how many of them, and things of that nature, is we're going to get a master schedule in April and not in September.
Yeah.
So that will give us a lot of ability to see whether or not, what do the class sizes look like, or because when they come to you in end of June with, here are the classes that have 12 or less, is it 12 or less or 10? 12 or less.
12, yeah.
That, in the end, when you start in September, there's even fewer kids.
Right.
So we're hoping to get to the point and know how many kids are really actually signed up and scheduled, and they got them in their places. No, there's some tinkering that will go on, but we should have a really good idea of, we got 2 classes with 8 in it. Why couldn't we make that 1? We'll be able to see those decisions
Much sooner.
much
Earlier,
sooner.
Yeah.
So when we make decisions about bringing the teachers back and what their workload looks like, we basically know where it is, because after the fact, it becomes a little bit more difficult once we told them what their assignments are to say, I'm sorry, you're not full-time anymore. That can be a bad place to be in. So that's, I think, a helpful part of it. And then talking with all the principals in that, I mean, you get to learn their programs, and every time I talk with them, you're learning something else. And it makes you start thinking about some things. So we'll have to think and discuss about those things. And I think it's just not, a lot of it's curricular in nature. I mean, one of the things I look at and I see, there's PE for 9th grade, PE for 10th,
Right.
PE for 11th, PE for 12th, which creates these small classes. Is that something we should continue? That's a curricular item. I mean, that's not to me at all, but it brings up that question. It's then up to Marvin and the principals, the teachers, to determine whether or not that's the direction that we want to continue in.
I think that the master schedule review is just one example of what we have done that's already had an impact, and I think is going to, because we looked at the master schedule, and then somebody said, well, can that be done earlier? Do we have to wait until the summer or the beginning of September to finalize that? So, well, let's ask. So I asked Dr. Davenport, I said, talk to your guidance counselors and see if it has to wait until that late in the year, or if we can do it earlier. So he talked to them, and he came back to us and said, they think they can do it earlier. I mean, it'll change the schedule of the meetings with the kids. That'll have to start sooner. So he says, well, do you want me to do that? I said, yeah, do it. Start earlier, finish earlier. So that's a change, and so we'll know some things earlier than we have. We also had our meeting a couple of weeks ago with the superintendent and the business official from Red Hook and from Pine Plains. We had talked about just having a little sit down and talk about possible
possibilities of shared services or whatnot. Just very general. We had a great meeting. I remember at that meeting, one of the superintendents said, yeah, we have ours done by the end of April. So, okay, so will we.
You can do it weekly.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So, unless you ask, you just assume that that's the way it has to be done, because that's the way we've done it for 30 years. So now we're here, we're asking the questions and we're getting the answer. Yeah, we could do it earlier. So good, do it earlier.
Diane, were you going to add something?
I was just going to add, I think for this budget cycle, I think probably the biggest thing that would be helpful from the committee, I think, is, for instance, if there's cuts, I think we'll have a better understanding of
Much better.
what they need, because we've gone through
Much
all the
better.
different areas. So I don't know if it'll help us make easier decisions, but more information.
I would just add that what has really struck me in all of the people we've interviewed and talked with, this kind of listening approach, how flexible people have been, and we also have attempted to preserve a lot of mental flexibility in terms of just looking at all different kinds of ideas, such as this, shifting the timetable. I think we've tried not to say it's just because the way it is. We've really tried to go back to first assumptions and ask a lot of questions. Why is it like this? Why is it like this? And I think everyone who's spoken to the committee really has taken tremendous care in trying to explain some of the thought behind it, but also recognizing there might be new ways to do it. So now we just have to sort of try to discern some patterns and some low-hanging fruit where maybe we can see some beginning places to make immediate changes, maybe in this budget cycle, with the goal of having the real plan emerge in year 2.
And we barely even scratched the surface on forecast 5, just for lack of time.
But all the data is in there and can be
Start
viewed and
accessing
sliced.
it.
For last year,
Yeah.
but you're never going to get it. It's never going to be up to date because the state education department doesn't give it to you until
Year
all the
later.
weeping and gnashing is done. But everything that SED has is already loaded in there. Our stuff's loaded in there.
And
So,
it's the past 5 years, isn't it? It's not just 1
Yeah.
year, right?
Yeah.
oh, I didn't mean to imply it was just 1 year, but they're always
A year behind.
You're behind.
behind. Yeah, that was my point. So.
I guess I should just ask if anyone wants to speak to goal number 2, because we've talked a lot about the other 2 goals.
Well, I think, let me just say, I think that has, unlike goal number 3, and more like goal number 1, that is tied to a board committee.
Yeah.
So, and I believe tomorrow the curriculum committee's meeting, and we've got these items on our agenda, so stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Steve, did you want to say
Well,
something?
I was just going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understood it, out of the 3 goals, that one is kind of the least progression has been made.
Right.
So it is year 2 of a 1-year goal. So I'm a little concerned that this is not going to get done, given that it's already halfway through, and we haven't really heard much about what progress has been made, what the measurable outcomes were for K through 12 integration of technology into the classroom, and how the students will be evaluated with that technology in the classroom. So, I'm not feeling a lot of confidence that this is going to be met, and I don't want it to happen again last year where you submit it with your evaluation, we didn't have a chance to get the presentation on it or ask any questions about it. So, I would just like to have a better understanding about what's going on, who's doing what, who's in charge of what, and how that is all funneling up to you.
Well, that's something that, as a committee, we can schedule a board presentation.
Okay.
But I think also I'd asked once before, we have Allison and Chancellor doing a lot of the teacher work there, and I had asked, well, who's going to be that counterpart in middle school and high school, and I haven't heard back yet if there was a person identified to do that.
In terms of technology integration, yeah.
So, who's the person on the ground that's going to be working with these departments or grade level? How's that working, and who's responsible for funneling that up to you?
Okay.
Other sort of things colleagues want to share, particularly with curriculum, since we're meeting tomorrow, this is a good moment to nudge us.
Well, I'd also would like to update, since it's been a year, on BMS Computer Lab. How's that new curriculum working out?
Sounds good.
Well, that's one of the questions that's on our agenda for
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Okay. We will have a report from curriculum at our next meeting.
That we will.
So are we ready to move on from our goal discussion? Okay. Budget development update with Tom Burnell. First draft budget.
All right. So in front of you, I put the first draft budget in front of you.
They had 3-hole punch.
The 3-hole punch.
Okay, there you go.
That's set there. You will get your binders next time with a lot of it completed and filled in. It's just too much of a short turnaround to get them all ready for you. So first one I'll go through the bigger packet first, which is the expenditure side, and then we'll talk about the revenue side. So, I don't know how much detail you want.
Can I make a suggestion?
Not too much, right? No, go ahead.
Well, it is already 9 o'clock.
I know, we can't go there.
I was going to suggest, but the board can feel free to override me, that maybe you hit on the differences between the rollover budget and
Yes.
the first draft budget, just to focus the conversation, that's
Okay,
it.
yeah. So we can definitely do that. Unfortunately, you don't have a comparison of the rollover budget to the first draft budget, but I do.
Sure I do.
So-
Laura has it.
And I looked at your email and I didn't see the differences you saw, but we will go through them, and so I don't know. So I got a little confused this afternoon when I compared the first draft to the rollover budget, saying, I don't see those differences, so I began to wonder about my first, the rollover budget, but we'll go through those as we go along.
Okay.
But on the first page with the Board of Education, one of the questions that got raised was Forecast 5, and no, I have not put that in the budget yet, because I haven't really done anything on the BOCES end. Today was the first day I got Ulster BOCES today. I will not get Dutchess BOCES until Friday. So I've made some assumptions, but they are not actuals at all. So I never saw a line for Forecast 5, so I never added it to the budget.
What BOCES do we post contract with that?
That's through Erie. And that
Would that
hasn't
come through
opened
would that come through the RIC?
up. No.
Okay,
But Erie hasn't put theirs out either yet.
okay.
So when Erie puts theirs out, I'll get notification, be able to go
right.
online to see what that cost is for next year. So,
We know that it's $7,000 roughly-ish?
right,
Okay.
right.
After the aid, right?
After 8.
Correct, that's after Erie.
And is that going to go in that in-service training code? Where is that going to go?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know where to exactly put it, to tell you the truth. I could see it in the business office, putting it in there. Put it in the Board of Education, because it's a lot of data that you're looking at. I can also see it in curriculum. I could probably break it up too and say, put the Forecast 5 into the business office, because that's dealing with the accounting and that end of it, where the Insight 5 is more curricular related. So I could split it up and put it between the two areas. But going back to the first page, I've gone through just at the bottom just to give you some ideas. You'll see about 3 lines from the bottom. We have a new salary in there for the secretary to the superintendent. So I've gone through. There's only been a couple changes since the beginning, since the rollover budget. That being that salary for that position. We've had one retirement mid-year, so I've made adjustments for that in the high school business or high school principal's office. But so the first page, not too much going on here except the salary change. As we go on to the second page, about halfway down, we have BOCES services under the category Business Administration. I put an additional $60,000 into that particular line, and that's for the accounting software that we're going to be investigating. Whether we take that full hit next year or not, that will be determined, or we don't even know if we'll be through BOCES, to tell you the truth. But but I put $60,000 aside.
That's what that's for.
For an accounting, a new accounting system.
Tom, is that an annual payment or is that
No,
just volume?
no. The first year is going to definitely be about twice as much, and then it will be basically be cut in half, and then that's becomes your maintenance piece.
And that's BOCES aidable as well?
Yes, that will be BOCES aidable, yes. So, don't know if we'll get exactly 50% of that back in future years, but remember, the first year you pay it out, you don't get any reimbursement until the second year. But our aid ratio, this is actually the only aid ratio I know that went up this past year. That was our BOCES aid ratio. It went from like 47 to low 50s. I mean, like 50.5 or something like that. So that was encouraging. All the other ones went down though. So one of the things also on this page, I did put an additional $4,000 into the external auditor's fee, audit fee. That's a couple lines from the bottom. We did an RFP. Those RFPs are due to me this Friday, and we'll start reviewing them with the audit committee starting next week. I just assume that it's going to be a little bit higher than the last time. I think the last people wanted to get their foot in the door down here and would give us a kind of a low number, but some of the other numbers were just slightly higher than that, so I'm hoping that that will be enough to cover us, and but we'll know pretty quickly whether or not that's enough, or we can cut back on that. We flip over to the next page. There's not too much difference here at all. Just very minimal increases. We switch over to the next page where we have operation and maintenance. For the salary lines that you will see throughout this entire document is step only. Okay? Any other particular raises are going to be in benefits, and we can talk about that in executive session. One change from the previous draft, the rollover budget, is the placement of a minivan into equipment. That's why you see that increase of $24,000 there. That is for a purchase of a minivan. That has been in previous years but taken out. We also have that money in the current year. So we do have monies. No, sorry, but yes. No, we do not have money set aside for that. We
The
took that
minivan,
money
not
out.
this year, no?
Yes, we took that out. What's that?
I was.
Correct.
We took that
You're
out during
correct.
the budget process last year. We did do some decreases for telephone and other expenses and general supplies. So almost kind of offsets each other with those particular items. Maintenance of plant, we do see, once again, sorry, it's step and plus longevity. I forgot about the longevity piece. Some of these people, a couple people will hit longevity for next year also. There was a bit of an increase to the repair and maintenance of that. One of the things that will be happening is we'll probably need some work on our boilers. Our boilers are getting a little over 10 years old, and Sheldon feels as though we may need to put some extra work into the boilers.
Were you seeing that?
Where's that?
That's A1621 467.
That was a
But
decrease.
it's going
in
back
budget.
down.
That's actually a code that got increased last year, but not used. So this is actually an increase over the rollover budget. But year to year, it's a decrease, but from the rollover budget to this budget, it's a $13,000 increase. Okay, so that's why I brought that up. Less than the previous year, but it's higher than the rollover budget that we presented last time. We go over onto the next page. Also, there's a decrease in the general supplies. That was another area in which we put additional monies into last year. The rest of it is, not too much. Some additional money for postage, copier supplies. Insurance, I might be able to come down on that one. I haven't gotten a quote yet, but should receive that sometime shortly. As far as that's concerned, so it's a possibility. We've been doing really, really good as far as insurances. We there. So we've been lucky along that way. So what is happening is, because I don't remember if they look back 5 or 6 years, I can't remember exactly the amount, but we really haven't had any claims over that time period. So those previous claims are knocking off, so that helps us as we prepare for the following year. As we switch over to the next page, nothing too much there. As I look through here, if you go to the very, very bottom, you'll see 3 lines from the bottom, clerical salaries, a decrease of 12,500, and that is due to a retirement. If we flip over to the next page, we did see an increase in other expenses at the high school. Also, if you look a little bit further down, travel and conference in the high school, which is, fairly significant increases that we'll need to take a look at. And this is mainly for additional trainings in service for the high school teachers. And you see in the BOCES services there, I might be able to back off this because I haven't got the BOCES yet today. They threw me and Marvin for a loop. They came out with a new service through Ulster BOCES. That was one of those things I got. Like, oh, well, this is definitely different from
Test
previous
scoring?
years. Test scoring. So they're looking at a different way to do test scoring, which I think this number will be able to come down. I did not factor any of that into this at this moment. Because test scoring does cost quite a bit, but it does cost a lot more to do it the old-fashioned way where we did it ourselves. Can't do that anymore. The next section down at the bottom you have is your regular school. There's been some switching. Let me tell you what we've done in this area. Okay, so there is 1 less teacher in the elementary school. So with 4 outgoing 5th grade classes, I'm only anticipating 3 incoming. So I don't see that any different than the past 4 or 5 years. But people have moved around. The other thing too is we had a couple of leaves of absences. They've been put back into the budget, okay? They are higher salaries than our long-term substitutes currently. So that's why you're seeing some increases that do seem a little bit higher, but when you look at the bottom line of that first line, it's 1.22%. So it kind of evens itself out, even though some look higher, some are lower, but overall, it looks like a little less than a step.
Tom,
Yes.
when are those?
March 1st.
March 1st, thank you. Counting the days.
There's 2 dates. There's the date for retirement purposes, which is February 1st, and then March 1st
Well,
is
it's not
for
February 1st. It's February 5th this year. It's the first
first
Monday in
of
February.
February. Forget it. First Monday of February. And we don't have any as far as I know at this moment, but hopefully maybe by the next time we meet, we might start to see some. I know I've heard a number on the Annie side of things, but to date, nothing has been put in writing and delivered to us.
They don't have the same schedule.
Yes, and what we're trying to tell them and keep on trying to tell them is they have a 90-day requirement, 90 days before they plan to retire. But you can do it even earlier than that. So we're trying to encourage people, you don't have to wait till it's just exactly 90 days. You can, if you know you're going to leave, you can put the paperwork to us now.
As could our instruction staff
Yes,
as well.
that's true too. Yep.
That's
you don't
a
have to
no
wait.
later than date.
Right.
It's not a on that date.
Right.
Correct. So as we switch over to the next page, this is our middle school and high school as far as those are concerned, so not too much difference in there. We do have a leave of absence coming back, but it actually added a .2 to also to the schedule. Current person, leave of, who's our learn term sub is a .8, bringing this person back as a 1.0 until such time as determined what is going on with that particular position.
Tom, the increase in the high school English equipment, what is that?
Yes. Now, I'll get there in a second. I will get there because I will make notes on that one. One of the biggest increases throughout the entire budget is the salaries for the teacher aides. You see it's $112,000 over the previous year. This is mainly due to a number of hirings that we had to do for health and for IEP
For special
requirements.
education.
I have spoken with Ms. Davison a couple of times. She knows the number of aides will be going down, but she can't tell me for certain how many. So that will be an ongoing conversation, and as those are determined, we will make appropriate adjustments to reduce the number of full-time equivalents for our teacher aides.
Why is that, Tom, sorry, why is that in here and not in kind of the programs for
special ed.
students with disabilities section? Like,
That's something that I'm going to be switching out now, because that is one thing. Teacher aides have always been in this one particular category. And that's one of the things I want to start breaking apart as special ed from regular, especially when it comes to these particular ones. And I think I'll have that ready for the next draft, where I will take them out and put them in a 2250 code.
It won't change the bottom line.
Won't change the
Put it in a
bottom
different
line,
place.
just get
Just
them
help them
separated out.
Yeah.
So you
Oh,
can
yeah.
check.
More
Exactly.
clarity.
Because most of our aides and monitors in the past have been for kindergarten, hallways, greeters, lunch aides. It's just recently we've all of a sudden gotten a few health-related ones and a few IEP related ones. Now, under the equipment, there are two codes in which we see 11,900 and 17,300. These are for computer carts by these departments.
Laptop cards?
Laptop carts. Now, these could definitely change. Steve is coming up with a plan for technology. We believe his technology plan will take these and put these in leases instead. So these numbers will come directly out of the budget completely, because I have money for leases already budgeted for next year. I'm keeping it level. I'm not increasing it. I'm keeping it the same. So he'll know how much money he has available to put towards getting carts and everything. And he actually has some money left over from this year's leases if he wanted to go out and get a few carts himself right now. So I think he's in planning stages with the high school to determine what needs to be purchased currently and for next year.
Tom, phys ed has requested laptop carts. As I understand it, they use more technology in phys ed with iPads already in the high school than any other department. So why do they need a laptop cart too?
No, I'll have to ask.
Thank you.
It may be that they want a dedicated one to their area, because these are shared, so I'm not sure if that's the reason why they want one completely dedicated to their, because they have people going through all the time.
We'll find out.
We'll find
and
out.
We'll also find out whether they need a dedicated
Right.
laptop card. Remember, this first draft budget, and this is no different this year than any other year, but for the benefit of our new board members, this first draft budget reflects the request submitted by the administrators to Tom. We haven't massaged it, we haven't cut this or moved that or done anything, just tell us what you think you need, and that's what's baked into here. So we move from here. All right, Tom, go ahead.
Go on to page 9. Minor changes throughout it, just nothing interesting or huge to you.
Sorry.
If we go over to the next page, if we take a look at the bottom line for textbooks, which is about 2/3 of the way down, there's an additional $8,700 worth of textbooks this year throughout everywhere. There's no one area. English, I think, is the biggest area, saying a $6,000 increase to their book supply and $3,000 in social studies. Those are the big ones. The rest of them are, grade 6 is a $2,300 increase. Under BOCE services.
Wait, sorry, Tom,
Yep.
before you move on. So another question, if you would ask on the social studies textbooks,
Yep.
there's no approved new curriculum. That's all in development. So are we spending a lot of money on textbooks that are going to be obsolete in a couple of years when the new curriculum comes around?
That's a good question. And one of the things too, and not that any school district has been held to this, but if you purchase textbooks and you get textbooks aid for it, you have to use that book for 5 years. You can't replace it just like that. I haven't heard of any school district being held to that, but it is in the law. So,
Can I ask you a question about the
I don't want us to be the first.
Can I ask a question about the classification, though? We call it textbook, but it may not actually be a classic textbook, right? It might be some other kind of material, readings, right? It could be paperbacks, it could be, I'm thinking in English, they have novels, they have, so, I mean, I guess that's a question. What, are these actually textbooks or?
Kind of, there's a little bit of a difference with textbooks, but a textbook is a book in which the entire class will use, meaning that I just can't buy 10 copies of something.
Yeah, right.
You know, I actually have to buy a
Classroom
classroom set.
Okay, a whole set, okay.
And an oddity is calculators are considered a textbook.
Because everyone has, yeah.
So, don't ask me why, but it does follow a textbook, which is fine.
Okay.
BOCES services have gone down. I took out, actually, we've had 2 placements in there, haven't been used, so I took 1 out. This is non-special ed. This is, so we really haven't had too much use of that, and felt as though it was time for that to go. If we switch over to the next page, really nothing under the.
You're on
first
page
two.
11 now?
Page 11.
Okay.
I'm on the first 2/3.
Yeah.
Sorry, Brian. So, the first big one, 2250, 150. Hold on, sorry.
That's special ed.
That's a big.
All right. So, we see a pretty large increase in the special ed salaries. Okay. Couple reasons for this. We have a self-contained classroom that employs 2 people, teacher and a teaching assistant. We've also pulled over all the teaching assistants who are in the middle school, and we're at 2110. That was part of the process to get everything to special ed. So there's definitely at least 5 additional people in that particular line that weren't there prior to this.
But they're going to be offsets from other lines.
Right, correct.
Okay.
Yes, the aid line will drop because of this.
If we go down a couple lines more, you'll see salaries, clerical, CSE, and you'll see that go from just 41,000 to 77,000. And it really shouldn't be salaries clerical. I'll put non-instructional in there. Is we have an interpreter for the deaf now. So that particular one's been added. That's already been taken out of the BOCES code. We'll get down to that in a second. So the next kind of section, we added equipment for the first time. Things that have come up, especially now that we have a self-contained classroom. Sometimes there's some needs and we need to purchase equipment. Next couple lines down are not that enticing. Now if we go over to the next page, we have tuition other. We see an increase of 105,000. Now, this number is based on our current people that are currently in place. I have had discussions with Emily, Christine and I have had discussions with Emily, and it's about BOCES and tuition other, about potentially some students who will be coming back to our school district. She has a few that she's planning to bring back, but it hasn't happened yet, and I have not made any adjustments yet until I know for certain that this will occur. So I'm doing it a bit cautiously. It's probably definitely overstated at this time, but we'll have to see where particularly anybody may be, potentially coming back to the self-contained classroom, coming back to regular classrooms in the high school. So she has some ideas about bringing some children back to our schools here. So I'm hoping that those numbers will be able to be lowered. In addition to that, in past years, I've had 2 unanticipated placements. It is now 3, and there is 3 in there. So
There's 3 in that number?
between the BOCES services and tuition other, I have 3 placements in there. Now, let me give you a whole thing, because it only takes one person to wipe out all 3 of those. And that happened to us this year. Just one person took everything out of there as far as that's concerned. So those have been built in. So there is 3 unanticipated placements in there. And also on the transportation end, there's a couple unanticipated bus runs. Hoping it doesn't happen.
And special ed bus runs.
Well, special ed, you never know with private and parochial who may sign up for those. But when we look overall, we see about a 4% increase, 150,000. If you look at halfway down the bottom line, 150,000. And that's really a lot of mixture of bringing kids back from BOCES, creating the self-contained classroom, decreases the BOCES services, but at the same time, I do have an increase of 105,000 in the tuition for others. So it kind of balanced itself out. We're hoping that this looks better, but that's something we'll have to determine as we go along. Occupational education is the next line, which is a pretty big line. It is not seeing a huge increase, and let me tell you kind of the reason why I think we're going to be here. We're going to be okay. First of all, we won't know till mid-February what the new number is as far as the kids coming in, but we had a very big increase in the number of juniors
Going to CTI.
going to CTI. Doesn't particularly expect that to happen with this group. He expects those who are leaving should be actually probably 1 or 2 less. He's thinking. That's Dr. D's thinking. But they don't take their trip down to the CTI until middle of February, and that's when the kids start to make those decisions. So keeping it the same and hoping it may get better, but it can't say for sure. The rest of this line, there's some magic steps in longevity in the school library, which we all like to know about those magic steps. Personnel committee knows about those. The next part of section goes to the library. Fine, dandy, not too much to worry about. This section here is with the computer-assisted instruction. I put in some increases, but not too many at this time. Steve attends what's called an ITSAC meeting, and at their next ITSAC meeting, he will get all the numbers for next year. And I think there's even some savings that are going to occur, and that is by putting I already fudged it a little bit by putting in doing a fiber project between this building and the building next door.
The smart bond money.
The smart bond money, and that's going to help us reduce our annual internet fee by 10 grand. So I'm already anticipating that is happening. So that's baked into this here. So, but that number, this area will change a little bit, especially under the BOCES computers. Once we get a little bit once he gets back from ITSAC and is able to tell us when he gets provided all those numbers.
I'm sorry, when did you say that meeting was?
In January.
Okay.
I don't know exactly which one. I just know it happens in January. I get everything. Like I know I'm going to my BOCES meeting on Friday where I'll be given all of BOCES, but not the computer area. Because that's a whole separate thing. The attendance area, see a slight decrease, and that's because part of the salary for the person who retired was coded to attendance. We get into the next section of guidance. I think the one I want to point out to you is other expenses. The high school, it's an increase of $8,000. Dr. Davenport has put in money in there for Naviance.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that
For what,
8,000
I'm sorry?
It's called Naviance. It's a guidance program.
Software.
Software for students preparing themselves for college and getting their, what I like to call resume, but I know that's not.
Like
the
digital
right-
portfolios.
Digital
Yeah.
portfolios, that type of thing. It's kind of nice. My son uses it. He started in 9th grade, so you add things as you go along and it happens, as opposed to getting to 12th grade and think, oh, what did I do in 9th grade? What did I do in 10th? So it is a nice way to get kids into it right away and start building that portfolio.
Apparently our new guidance counselor is very proficient in Naviance and used that in his previous school district. So all of a sudden it's something that might be beneficial to have.
Can you find 8,000 to offset?
Well, that's the,
That's like one other question.
again, that's the trick right there.
So as we get to the next page, not so much under health services, not much of a change at all. The psychology and the social worker, you'll see a little bit higher than normal, and this is because they're related to the federal projects, and we get less in the federal projects, so more's got to be funded by the general fund. Switch to the next page, co-curricular, you'll see a decrease of about $8,000, and that is the money that was taken out of last year. We did not take the money out of the budget because the budget passed, but we did cut back those positions, so I'm just cutting right to
That was one of your questions, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We get into the next section with interscholastic athletics, the scoreboard. Thanks for reminding me about that. I have a way, I believe, I can get that without adding anything to the budget, but
Magic.
Get Coca-Cola to sponsor it? Just kidding, just kidding.
but you'll see some other increases. You'll see under other expenses fees, about $6,000. Our trainer is going to go up in cost. As far as that's concerned.
It's a contract service.
It's a contract service. I've discussed with Mr. Boucher about putting an RFP out for the athletic trainer. So we're looking to do that this spring and see about that. You'll see $4,000 additional under BOCES services, and it's really basically the cost of officials keep on rising. So we're just trying to keep ahead of that. Yes?
I'm sorry, non-athlete. What does an athletic trainer do?
Well, the athletic trainer is here from the beginning of 9th period through the end of practices, and he is there to...
Or she.
Or she.
Or she, that's true, yeah, we've had, currently a he, but we've had plenty of women in the past.
Yeah.
But
Most of them.
they, provide, I don't want to say
They provide
physical
preventative
therapy,
care.
Preventative, right.
Like they
up
take
after
kids and
Injury.
help
care of
them
injury.
not get injured, and then if they do get injured, then they're like the first responders on site.
Thank you.
We've had it in the past very big on the concussion side of things. They go through all the testing, making sure the athlete's ready to come back.
Return to play
Working with
procedure,
the
yeah.
district physician. We go on the next page and we're looking at transportation. And a couple things that you'll see that are some increases. First of all, actually, Ms. Davison talked to one of them, and that's McKinty Vento. I do have a student that's costing me some money, bringing one child from out of the district into our district, and I had to add that to it. I don't know, it might be possible that she comes back to live in Rhinebeck. I can get rid of that, but currently she does not live in the district and don't know when she will.
Wait, which line would?
That would be transportation residents.
Okay, resident.
Right below that is handicap. Putting one unanticipated placement in there, hoping it doesn't come. In fact, I'm kind of hoping through the process with Ms. Davison, we may be able to subtract a run or two. And the increase in the non-public was I realized one of the buses that we had coded to defile, because of the number of kids on the bus, we had to go to total. And total buses cost more than a defile.
Because you had more kids.
Because they got
than
more
Defile
kids.
could-
But Defile would have had to do it as 2 runs, which of course is more expensive. So I had to increase it because it moved from Defile to total. Maybe it moves back the other way. But until we get through the process, I won't know. Let's see. We get in the area of employee benefits. I guess what I can say is about is the following, because it's kind of hard to say, because a lot of this is where we put the monies for negotiations. So I don't want to talk too much about it, but I can tell you in total, the employee retirement system, they went down a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. The teacher retirement system went from 9.8% to 11. And they said, oh, that's only a slight increase. That's a 10% increase. It's not a little increase, it's 10%. Now, it could come back down because it gave us a range of 10.5 to 11. I used 11. And hopefully as the process goes along, I think it's, I remember it was February or March, but we'll get what it is going to be. So hopefully we'll have some savings there. Workers' comp, expecting a slight increase. We're doing pretty good along that particular item. Right now in health insurance, I'm budgeting 10%. We'll have to see what goes on at the DHIC table over the next 2 months and get that. But one of the things that I realized what was happening, because I got really concerned last year as to the health insurance overall jumped a little bit higher than I wanted it to. And I went back and looked at where the changes. First of all, we had a lot of new hires, so that was part of it. But we also had a lot of individuals who became families, whether it was through marriage, through a domestic partner. But we had a number of them occur last summer. And so I'm hedging that that's going to happen again. So I put a little bit of an extra hedge in there of 5 individual contracts becoming family contracts. So we'll have to see. And unfortunately, I did not make any change to the budget because it happened today. One of our retirees passed away. So it's unfortunate. Miss Jones, I'm sure you have no idea who
No.
she is. Retired, a long, long time ago, retiree. Our debt service pretty much remains the same, hasn't changed. Wait a second, hold on a second. Just make sure. Got 2 different documents. Yeah, that hasn't really changed too much. Next year, we'll see a pretty good decrease. One of them retires next year. And then on the last line, we see a $28,000 increase. This was the same as the rollover, but that's a part of the audit report in which I think it was a $136,000 deficit in the federal funds or through our federal grants. And it's a 5-year plan to reduce that debt. So to get rid of that, unless we can come up with some way earlier than that, but that sufficed to our audit, our auditors as a good plan, as opposed to, in some cases, some auditors said, no, you just got to take the whole thing right now. It was nice that they liked the plan and how we put that together. So, okay, any questions along that line?
So stay tuned.
Okay, so let's go to the tax levy limit. Real quickly, start with last year's tax levy. You add in the tax base growth factor, which was 0.57 in the Rhinebeck School District. A little less than average, but still not bad. You add in this year's pilots. You subtract out the taxes levied for exemption. And this is the difference between our debt service and our building aid. I have adjusted our CPI. I'm going with 2. I had it at 1.8. Last month, if you remember, I think it was at 2.05. This past month, it went up a little bit. It went to 2.13. I'm not anticipating in 1 month it's gone below 2. I just don't think that's happening. So I think we're pretty safe with 2.
Just got back from Las Vegas. So.
We're all in that back.
Feeling good. Just feeling good.
Then you subtract out your pilots for next year, any available carryover. Flip and go over to the next page. And we see here on the left-hand side, the capital local expenditure, which is the same on the first page. Once again, that's your debt service minus your building aid. Until I get an aid run, I'm not going to change that until that's it. So I think we're pretty safe with that. So it creates just short of $700,000, which is 2.51%. Not too bad. So, any questions about the tax cap? Okay, so we get on to the revenue side. You'll see right away we're at 6.89%, which is quite high. I've made absolutely very little changes here on the revenue side until it becomes a little bit clearer. We have no state aid runs. We do have a couple, just as we go down here, we got under charges for services, non-resident tuition. We currently have a couple kids here, okay? Now we'll have to look ahead to see whether or not they will continue next year. So I might hedge against that. Right below that is interest and earnings. It's getting better. Don't know how much better yet. So we may be able to make an adjustment there, but I can't say for sure yet.
Not to the end of the year.
What's that?
Not to the end of the year.
Yeah. So then we have other various things, but I'm not making any changes. I didn't make any changes to state aid at all, because I just don't know what's going to happen yet. You hear the doom and gloom.
Sound good.
It doesn't sound good, but I don't know if you saw today's plan in the paper about, I don't know, I didn't quite get it all, but they wanted to eliminate increases for people on the age of 65, and that it would get picked up through the state to make them whole. So I don't know. It was
Whose plan is this?
Mr. Cuomo's.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly what that is. So I'll wait till I see it. I didn't see how that was going to be revenue neutral at all.
Not to us, then.
Not to, yeah. I did make a couple changes at the very bottom, and that's the interfund transfer for debt service. Our number in that account has been dropping, so we're starting to wean ourselves off of that. And also our appropriated fund balance, subtracting $100,000 in there to hopefully turn around and start building a fund balance greater than what it currently is. But it does leave us a revenue shortfall of, over 1.2 million, which is a pretty big number. But I think there's some room for these numbers to come down. Like I say, I always try to go out, a little
Worst
bit
case.
Worst case. I don't see it getting any worse than this, that's for sure. So I'm hoping that, over time, we'll start to see that number come down. But I don't see us getting down to zero. That I feel as though that some cuts are going to definitely need to be made. Now, whether that could be made up through the retirements, and then looking at the retirements as to whether or not they need to be replaced, things of that nature, could definitely help us out. It's hard to say. The next couple of months, there'll be a lot of activity on the personnel end of things as far as those retirements. And
Well, we'll know by February 5th about retirements.
Right.
And then
So
the-
it's not too far away. Right. And I'm trying to encourage the Yanni people, if you are going to retire as of July 1st, to go ahead, let us know.
Let us know,
The sooner those decisions are made and given to us, that's less that we have to look at as far as possible cuts. But it's a tough year. We've culled a lot out of budgets over previous years. And one of the things I'm definitely looking at is cutting back on the number of bus runs. We haven't done that yet. All the bus runs are in there, but I know I'm pretty positive I can get rid of one bus. That I think is a no-brainer. That can be done.
Tom, it's also worth saying that legally, state law does not oblige us to provide all of the transportation that we currently provide. Is that correct?
Well, we do go above and beyond, but that's what our current policy is. If you want to change that policy, then you have to bring it to the voters of the school district.
That's right.
So, I mean, it is possible that you can change the limits. Currently, for the elementary school, there is no limit. You could live one house away, you get transportation. For this building, it's 1 mile. So it's mainly really the village that walks here. There are a couple other places, that are less than 1 mile, but due to road conditions, we bring them in. But it's not causing us to put extra buses on the road for that matter. I mean, there's a handful.
My house.
Yeah, that's one of them.
This is
That's one of them.
basically Steve.
That's one. And to me, that's going to be one of the issues if you do look to put a proposition up for the elementary school to go to 1 mile or half mile, whatever it is. It's that Knollwood going up that way, because that definitely you cannot. It's awful.
There's no sidewalks there.
There's no sidewalks, and that's the other problem. There's no sidewalks that connects the whole village over to CLS. It's getting closer, but it's still a little.
And the village is very interested, but being interested in having the money to do it is a whole other thing.
That quick.
And I appreciate their interest, but
With that changing the limits, do you know if that would save a bus, or, is there?
Well, here's the issue. Here's the big issue, and that is this particular school. Because if we have that bus coming to this school, you're paying for it. So you might as well have it go to the elementary school. So reducing the number of runs to CLS doesn't necessarily reduce the number of runs to this school. I think we probably could. It will mean a little bit longer on the bus, and we could spread that out, because as you know, even though we'll have 50 kids on a bus, some of them come in with 40. I mean, your run, for example, comes in pretty packed. I mean, you get 40 kids that come off of that bus. And then you have another bus come in that has 50 people assigned to it, only 5 kids get off the bus.
My bus.
Which, I wish I knew why. I mean, I know why for years no one wants to drive all the way in, turn around and drive all the way back out. I get that. But some of the buses, we try to make sure they all start from a point and come in. And some of them, I don't get why some buses aren't used as much as others. Like I say, there's a couple buses, like 1, 2, and 3. I mean, there's 40 kids getting off every morning. And there's other buses come up and 5 kids get off.
Consistently, or?
Consistently.
And this has been something that many people have noted over the years, so if we could find some way
That opt-out, parent opt-out isn't an option?
to really
not.
explore right-sizing the buses again. We talked about that.
I can overpopulate
years.
buses.
Right.
So I can say, I want 70 kids on this bus.
Right.
But then when you route the whole
That sounds like an
thing,
airplane.
Yeah, you have to go.
you're going all over the place, and you're talking it's an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah, no, it's,
And that's the problem. I could
you're
get
wasting
it,
time
where
not
I
picking
could bring
kids
in
up.
more, less buses, but some of these kids are going, after routing everybody through, and then
Well-
what's going to happen is, okay, this kid never gets picked up, so we won't go 5 minutes out of the way to get him, and all of a sudden that's the day he needs it. And, ooh, what did he come today?
Is
yeah.
it the state that says you can't do the opt-out? Like, what is the parent opt-out?
No, you're not allowed to.
Not allowed to have
That's
that.
state law.
Yeah, you can't opt them out. Case of emergencies, things of that.
Right.
You gotta be able to get them all home. Doesn't happen often, but you gotta have it available when you really do need it. And the thing is, probably more than likely, the parents are coming to pick them up anyways, but you
Yeah.
gotta have a seat for them.
Opt out, opt out. All right, so are there any other last thoughts, comments, or shall we just try to digest
tuned.
what we've learned tonight? Okay, so on to board committee reports, communications. Those are mine.
So Tom was an invited guest for the first couple of minutes of our meeting. Apparently, we're upgrading School Messenger, and the question came up because the first 2-hour delay we had, there were some parents who weren't notified, though they had been in the past, so there were questions about why that was happening. I think Tom's in the midst of testing the upgrades with faculty. We'll send
Should
out.
be out to the community within the next day or two, because I got a little afraid sometimes, because I saw snow on the forecast, so I don't want to put it out there when that's out there, right? You know,
Yeah,
it's,
You hold it off until April.
well, thought about that too.
but the benefit is that parents are going to be able to change their own settings about how they want to be notified, rather than having to go through Tom's office to get it done, and so that'll be good. We continued our conversations about social media. Steve Jensen talked to some area BOCES, tech directors, who all cautioned against moving forward with social media before we had a policy in place. So Steve's going to reach out to legal and get a draft for the policy committee to review. But we wanted to try and keep the conversation rolling and try to remain proactive about our whole Facebook conversation. So the committee is going to try to generate some sort of FAQs that we can have on our About section once a page goes live, particularly about timely questions. Since we're not going to have a dedicated staff person to be manning Facebook, we need to have really clear disclaimers on the page about, if it's a 2-hour delay, don't check Facebook to find out if show choir's going on. You've got to, so Joe's going to talk to the building principals about procedures, about delays, what happens in the building for before school programming and after school programming, that kind of thing. We're also asking Steve to check if we can sort of develop the look of the page offline and then populate it once we've got our policy in place. He's looking into that. And we're also going to look to other schools about how frequently they post, what their rules for posting are, those kinds of things to help us out. Joe and Steve will be the first administrators to have access, but there's great potential to expand it to other administrators. We talked about sports teams and allowing coaches to have better communication with their parent and athletes. So hopefully we'll get going with that. Steve Boucher is going to do some research. And for long-range planning, we talked about the idea of informational brochures being put out into the community where they would be best suited. We know that realtors can't promote specific schools, but we're wondering if information can be made available to people. We're also reaching out to medical recruiters in the area who bring people from far away to staff the hospitals, and they're looking for places to educate their kids. So I've got a line out on those, and Jacqueline's going to check in with Mary Beth Kale about other venues where informational brochures might be a good idea to sort of promote the Rhinebeck brand. We also want to brainstorm issues about sort of the positive examples of our kids' impact on the community and as a school, and project this message much more broadly, hopefully through the budget newsletter as well, which we began redesigning last year, and we're going to continue those conversations starting with our Thursday meeting to try to get some more interesting, newsworthy, noteworthy information out that supports the reason why our budgets look the way they do. So we're going to check with the journalism class and see if those kids want to write anything for it. Stay tuned. We will continue all of those.
Any questions or communications? Facilities, not facilities, personnel.
Those are also mine. We spent our meeting sort of prepping for the upcoming Annie negotiations. Tom sort of reviewed the differences between competitive and non-competitive civil service rankings for us, so we had better understanding of that. The rest of it will be an executive session.
Questions? No? Okay. Facilities, that's me. We got a pretty comprehensive update from Tom on a meeting that took place in mid-December with Tetra Tech and Palumbo about where we're at with all these sort of timelines on our project. We are hoping, the whole schedule which you've been given, it's at your places, we're hoping that we will get a final approval date of February 5th. Tom's thinking mid-February at the latest, and it doesn't really make sense to get involved in the bidding or trying to get specs until we get through that part of the process, because we don't want to have to be held up and go back and revise. It takes more time and expense in the long run. We talked a little bit about second-party review. As you all remember, that was something that was being discussed long ago as a possibility for expediting capital projects, and we got our project in earlier before that was a possibility. Also, it'd be expensive, so that's just not going to impact us. We did look at the timeline in the scope document, but what we were looking at the time of that meeting was not updated in real time, and it was just kind of a broad strokes outline of what to expect. That being said, the total project cost goal is somewhat off of what they're projecting the cost to be. And the first being, gosh, it's an awfully big number, isn't it? $12 million, and the total project cost now coming in a little over $13 million. So we talked about where the reconciliation will take place, right, around the alternates. We had a whole list of alternates. Obviously, those are expendable. And Tom talked about the budgeting that goes into the category of incidentals, and that is a place where he anticipates quite a bit of melt. Is that a correct word? I hope melt. So savings would have to come kind of in those two categories as we look at the budget documents. I did raise the question that had come up around our board table of having a look early enough at what the appearance of things will be, and it was acknowledged that sharing those renderings would be appropriate, particularly things that have kind of aesthetic concerns like the front of the building and so forth. We also really wanted to put it to all members of the board that there are going to be moments, right, where we're going to start to have to make decisions. Given that we have this gap between the project goal and the expenses that we're beginning to tally up, what is your will in terms of how we come and present our thinking and our deliberations to you? Because we're going to have to be doing that before too long. So that's just a question we can mull over now. I don't know if we have to have an answer to it, but it's coming at some point down the road.
Because here's what I do want to add something here, and this is, the issue is once we get the bids back and we get the numbers, they can't proceed until we do a bid award here.
Yeah.
So it's a very critical period where he could get these back, but if we take too long to make decisions and act on them, things may not get done this summer.
Right.
Some things are okay, they can wait until the next summer, but some things are going to be very critical about getting done this summer because it's a part of the whole project. That this is the first phase that needs to be done here. Give you an example, they don't think anywhere in the world that the window walls aren't going to be put in until next year. They're not going to happen this summer. By the time we award it, shop drawings are done, we approve those shop drawings, they're not going to even bend one sheet of metal until that whole process is done. And that's going to be some time. It's going to take a long time. So but to get other things done, because Sheldon's worried about getting the building ready for next year too. So, if we want to get all the lights replaced this year, we can't wait till May to make those decisions. They have to be really acted on real quickly. But the thing is, you have to look at the overall context of everything. You can't just look at that one item. Oh, that's under budget. Well, there could be something that's over budget that you need that's over here.
Exactly.
You can't approve this without knowing what that is.
Right.
So just to let you know, there'll become a crunch time come March, April, where we're gonna have to meet. And we may need to meet a couple of times, depending on how you guys want to do it.
So you're proposing we might have to just hold some special meetings where we're going to have to talk as a group about some very time-sensitive decisions.
As a full group or as a committee?
Well, that's part
Well,
of what
that's your decision. I mean, it could be done at facilities, and your recommendation comes to the full board, or full board.
We don't know, we're just gonna have to see how the.
So we just want to kind of flag this, that it's coming, and we'll want to think about process, so people have ability to weigh in, yeah.
So this is mostly like if we're under budget, things we want to add to the project, do you want us to weigh in, or is that what you're generally
That,
talking
It
about?
could
well,
go
that's the,
either way.
that's the
Give it
best
away.
case,
It
that's the
could be
best
the
case
other way.
scenario.
So things we have to-
We don't get to do that
Yeah.
X part of the project, and, you know, or we have to make a decision between two.
Is it appropriate to do some of this through email with the full board?
Yeah, what are the,
Well, you get information, but you can't make, you can't vote.
so we could share information about an impending decision, and then we could ask, would people like to empower the committee, or would we like to call a special meeting? We could do that, right?
Do
Then you
it.
can say like this,
Anything else?
here's two options, like,
Yeah.
at least you
And this will put us $500,000 over budget.
Yeah, do you guys feel comfortable with at least using email?
Yeah, I think you guys
Okay.
should have great reign over this process unless there's a real problem that you feel like the board needs
Okay.
to participate in.
Share the plan.
Yes,
Okay.
Well, ultimately, the full board is gonna have to approve.
You're gonna have to approve
So you're
this.
still gonna have to have that vote.
We don't want there to be surprises where you're like, what do you mean? Why didn't you know, tell us? Yeah. Okay. So just keep that in mind. March and April, crunch time, in so many ways. Okay.
Nothing else.
All right, I'm going to quickly tell you about the long-range planning committee that just met, and basically, we did not get to forecast 5 because we spent a lot of time talking to our athletic director, Steve Boucher, who is going to come and do a full report for us on numbers, so I'm not going to get...
At our next
I'm not
meeting.
going to get into the weeds here too much with any of that, but we did ask a lot of questions about how decision-making around numbers of students interested in a sport kind of unfolds in real time. He shared a lot of thoughts about that. We talked about what's happening at the section level, the state level, how schools with declining enrollments are dealing with fielding teams, some possible developments that might change that moving forward. We asked about what his view was of booster groups such as SOAR. He pointed us to how kind of active the group is in Red Hook. It's continuing to support their athletic teams. We got a sense about where the bulk of the cost is, and it's not so much for equipment and supplies, which I think is often what booster groups try to help out with. It's really more for transportation, the cost of the trainer, and the stipends for the coaches. So for our next meeting, we have asked Tom to try to give us a per student cost for each sport, so we can kind of get a sense of, you know, where the tipping point is in terms of how much we're devoting to the participation of our students and whether we can continue that. We talked about how important, given the feedback we've gotten from the community, the capacity to participate in sports seems to be for many families. And we talked about that with Mr. Boucher. We talked about the philosophy behind our program. And then, again, I'll reiterate, we hope to get that per student cost data for interscholastic athletes. We are going to review all the survey responses we have received now over a period of a month and a half or almost 2 months. And we're going to try to get more deeply into Forecast 5 at our next meeting. But as I mentioned before, we are reviewing all of our notes. Members of the Long Range Planning are reviewing all of their notes now to begin to sort of see some patterns and opportunities for budget planning season right now. That's it. I think I summarized that pretty quickly.
Yes, you did.
Okay. So, shall we move into the next section of our agenda? That would be the good news. Yes, Steve?
Our RSF is going to work with Bard for Science Night Out at CLS from K through 5. I think it's
From the 18th, yeah.
yeah, from 6 to 7:30, and the theme is space. So
Oh, super cool. Super cool. That's great. Yeah, Laura?
Seems like everybody's voting wildly for the $25,000 grant.
Yes!
Best advertised thing that ever happened to the school.
It's amazing!
It's amazing. But I don't know,
guys have
that's
to
an
start
awfully
doing
long
some
list
other
of schools.
jobs.
It's an awfully long list of
Okay, they're
schools.
going to marketing or something. Get
Those
out of
guys,
education.
seriously.
I don't know, every time I open it up, the list is in a different order, so
Yeah, I
I'm
think
not
they
sure
do
if
that
that's.
so
To terrorize
robots
us.
don't
Yeah.
vote for
If,
this.
if a robot could find all those signs and cars and roads,
Yeah.
I'd be pretty impressed.
I'm just
'Cause it's
saying.
driving me nuts. The 10 emails I'm using, it's like,
Yeah, I know.
I'm doing mine with the QR reader.
that would be easier.
Yeah, no, I've got it sitting on my desk, and every morning I just go. It's very cool.
Perfect.
And I'm getting emails from Kevin Yarnell about once every 15 minutes.
Oh, really? About the numbers? Is he charting it or?
No, about do this, tweet this. I said,
But it's
I
kinda
do
awesome.
have a life, Kevin.
It's kind of.
Well, you know what?
That person who's going to do our social media presence.
It does take that generation of people.
Yeah.
No, they're doing it all through social media.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's very good news.
Yeah.
Rock on.
Anything else? Yeah, Diane.
I just wanted to say what a great job our building crew do. I've been in the building a few different times, and at this time of year with salt and everything, I mean, my own house, I can't keep it up, but, you know, the car, everything looks great all the time.
It really does.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's beautiful. Indeed. Old business. Any old business? Laura?
I just had a quick question. Last time we talked about the block grant for the village crosswalk.
Yeah.
At the.
Yes.
Have you heard anything?
No.
about it?
No, I have not. We haven't met, but I haven't heard anything.
Seeing that we have no public, we will continue to other.
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
You have another?
Yeah, so I emailed everybody about the legislative breakfast on January 20th from 10 to 11:30. Number of people responded, but I think maybe one or two didn't. So if you haven't responded about the legislative breakfast, please do. They just want a head count, so.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that we started off yesterday with a surprise visit/inspection from the state. What's PESH? Is that their office?
Public Employee Safety and Health.
It's like the state version of OSHA,
Exactly.
and they are also the OSHA Meisters as well. So they do surprise inspections. Obviously, they want to catch you with your pants down, as it were. I guess Marvin, Sheldon said the last time they were here was, I think, 2011.
I know
So it's been, I mean, they don't come every year, obviously. So it's been a while since they've been here. You know, they're looking for things, I mean, from mundane things like you have a
daisy chain microwave.
that's daisy chained, or you
Got
have an overhead projector that has one of the three the ground prong that's missing. So that's a violation. And this is just not for kids. What's that? Well, some of the stuff that's on the regular fire safety inspection, but other stuff. You know, they look in your shop to make sure you have a guard over a piece of heavy equipment. You know, like a grinder. You get that kind of stuff. Apparently, they're big lately on looking at your chemical storage and safety and inventory and whatnot. So anyway, and they're like any other inspectors. They don't leave until they find stuff. But the weird thing is, for the seriousness of the stuff for which they're looking, they don't get back to us with a report for 3 or 4 months.
Oh, jeez.
Seriously.
Then give you another month to fix it.
Yeah. Before they fine you.
Employees are in danger, I'll let you know.
Yeah, next year.
And yeah.
So
It's urgent.
most of the stuff that they called out, and apparently she said she didn't seem to be like, oh my God, you got to shut this building down. This place is crazy. But a lot of the things that she found either have already been fixed or taken out of service or have been already in process. So we've got like 3 or 4 months before they even give us a report. These are things you need to fix, comply with. So I just wanted to let you know, because we'll get that sometime later this spring, and I don't want that to be a surprise to you. Like, why didn't you tell me that they did this inspection 4 months ago? I'm telling you that they did this inspection. It's been years since they did the last one. We'll take care of what we have to take care of.
So did Sheldon walk around
Oh,
with
yeah.
her and she called things out as they?
Well, some things she called out and some things she didn't. She said, well, it'll be in the report, so. You know, I don't know. This is government at its finest, so. Again, that's just a heads up, so you know. So when we get the report and we have to fix this, and this in April, you'll know where it came from. And that's all. And I really don't have any more specifics to give you because they haven't given it to us, so.
Okay.
That's it. on
Any
that one.
other? Okay, so let's move on to our action
Okay.
items. Is there anything that anyone would like to remove from the consent agenda? Okay. All right, may I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? It's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve as a final reading the modifications to the following board policies. Number 5240, public performances by students. Number 5305, eligibility for extracurricular activities. Number 5311.4, care of school property by students. Number 5680, student fees, fines, and charges for school equipment. Number 5751, video cameras. Number 6110, budget planning. Number 6113, dissemination of budget recommendations. Number 6210, local tax levy. And number 6240, investments.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the Rhinebeck Central School District Special Education Plan?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? We thank Emily Davison for presenting all of this so thoroughly earlier in the evening. All those in favor? Okay. That is unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept the following award from the Rhinebeck Parent Teacher Student Organization, PTSO, in the total amount of $300 as follows. Books for CLS Children in Need from the Scholastic Book Fair, submitted by Fern Locks and Morgan Labruto, in the amount of $300 as stipulated.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? We are grateful to the Rhinebeck PTSO for its generous support of our schools. All those in favor? That is unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept grant awards from the Rhinebeck Science Foundation in support of funding for the Creating Origami Models program, as submitted by Ms. Robin Berger, in the amount of $1,095.60, and for the Citizen Science Day at Bard College program, as submitted by Kristen Kogel, in the amount of $340 as stipulated.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Again, 2 wonderful opportunities for our students supported by the Rhinebeck Science Foundation. All those in favor? That is unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the list of additional emergency conditional substitute teachers and substitute non-instructional staff for the 2017-18 school year?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept a grant award of $100 from the Reformed Protestant Dutch Church of Rhinebeck Flats, Inc.
Rhinebeck Flats.
to the 2011-18 RHS BMS Nurses Fund.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? We thank the Reformed Protestant Dutch Church for their generosity and their support
Of Rhinebeck
Flats.
Yes.
All those in favor? I don't know where Rhinebeck Flats is.
I imagine it's the Dutch Reformed Church, and this
I
must be
didn't know
what they
that's
used to
the
call
full-
Rhinebeck Flats at
Rhinebeck
one point.
No, essentially.
With 2 T's.
You know, like Rascal Flats.
All right. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of additional enrichment program advisors for Chancellor Livingston Elementary School for the 2017-18 school year? See attached.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of Mara Hermele as a long-term substitute in the position of school social worker at the Chancellor Livingston Elementary School, effective on or about January 26, 2018 through March 11, 2018, at the pleasure of the board, at the per diem substitute teacher rate, or at step 1, MA plus 30 plus 6, $62,156 prorated if the leave extends beyond 30 days in accordance with the RTA salary schedule for 2016-17. This appointment is to fill the vacancy created by the leave of absence granted to Morgan LaBrujo, school social worker at the Chancellor Livingston Elementary School.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to make a correction to the list of 2017-18 BMS after-school program instructors? See attached.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept an anonymous donation in the amount of $3,300 to support the expansion of the CLS backpack program from 12 to 30 families?
So moved.
Second. I would say this is an incredible act of generosity
Yeah.
and what a worthy cause to support. All those in favor? It's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of additional advisors for Rhinebeck High School for the 2017-18 school year? See attached.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion to move into executive session to discuss negotiations and input from the Personnel Committee to aid us in such negotiations?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, we are moving into executive session.